It's 1982. The greatest innovator in the world has just been detained on account of conspiracy to obtain and distribute $24 million worth of cocaine. A man who had it all 20 years ago. Money, power, beautiful models, and a company that was going to revolutionize the world forever.
The DeLorean. Gull-wing doors rise effortlessly, beckoning you inside.
And beat one of the biggest automotive companies in the world, known as GM, General Motors. A man who was the Elon Musk of his time. These are the hidden chronicles of John Z Delorean. But always remember,
all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
John DeLorean was born on 6 January 1925 in Detroit, Michigan. He was the son of poor immigrants who came to work in the auto industry during the Great Depression. After serving in World War II, he abandoned his dream to become a musician and took up a job as an engineer at Chrysler. By 1956, he was known as the top engineer of his time. He was later recruited by GM under the Pontiac division, where his life would change forever. In 1965, he changed GM's Pontiac division and the world of muscle cars as we know it. His idea was to put a big block 389 motor in the Pontiac Tempest that was designed to be an economy car. John, with his idea, approached Bill Collins, an engineer and friend, and in 1963, they started the project. John started by putting the 389 in his own car, and every time he would lend it to friends and family, he had a hard time getting it back. This showed John that there was an untapped market for muscle cars. So in 1964, he goes into a meeting with sales managers at GM with the idea of a Pontiac GTO, a 4-seater muscle car with 384 horsepower. At first, the board was skeptical, but they started off with production of 30,000 units, but later sold 250,000 GTOs in the first 5 years of production. This car became a pop culture icon, from iconic commercials with tigers,
all agile, all wide track. Don't let the bucket seats and sumptuous interior fool you. In the action department, the 66 GTO beefs up to 360 horsepower. It's all nimble, all tiger, all wide track. Pontiac GTO for 66. See it in captivity at your Pontiac dealer. Everything's new in Tiger Country.
To a song by Ronnie and the Daytonas known as My Little GTO.
Little GTO, you really lucky.
This car single-handedly transformed the muscle car industry of the 1960s. After the success, John DeLorean moved to the 14th floor in the 70s and became an executive in his mid-40s, becoming the youngest executive in America. All John had to do for the next few years was to hear and do what he was told, and eventually he would become the president of GM, the largest corporation in the world. John knew that he who has the gold makes the rules, and John made GM a lot of money, and he started doing what he wanted, even if it was controversial to company policy. From wearing open collar shirts, growing out his sideburns, weightlifting, to plastic surgery to make his jaw look stronger, John DeLorean was slowly reinventing himself. So in 1965, he divorced his first wife and started dating actresses and supermodels who were half his age. He married Kelly Hoffman, who was 19 years old at the time. This caused a lot of uproar from GM, and the PR team had to add years to her age after press releases. 3 years later, she leaves him, and DeLorean remarries 1.5 years later to world top model Christina Ferrari. Meanwhile at GM, his superiors couldn't stand him, but John reminds them of the sales numbers he's producing for both Pontiac and Chevy. This baffled them and proved that Mr. John DeLorean was untamable.
How do you feel about our retail sales job this past year?
How do I feel? John, I feel great.
Due to the rising demand for small economy cars and Volkswagen dominating the market, with the gas crisis looming in the 70s,
This is unreal. Isn't this disgusting? Why doesn't anybody contact the president? Why is he letting this happen to us?
To sum up in the word of one irate motorist, the first day of the odd-even system was a disaster. Gas lines at many stations were a lot longer than normal.
Line today is longer than it's ever been. I have no explanation for it.
This gas line at one station on the Upper West Side ran from 96th Street and West End Avenue all the way up to 102nd Street. As might be expected, the longer the line and waiting time, the angrier some motorists became.
I think it's terrible. I really think it's terrible. I'm in here for an hour already.
There's no shortage. I don't believe there's a shortage.
John knew that GM was going down due to the quality and consumption of their cars. But GM didn't want to adapt to these new regulations.
Obviously, I saw the trends very clearly, and I wanted to react to them a little bit, perhaps more aggressively than other members of the industry management.
So John had a genius idea of becoming GM's president and taking the company to new territories. So in 1973, John DeLorean was tasked with the job of delivering the infamous Greenbrier speech, where John was supposed to criticize GM on their production quality, and this would vindicate him, showing his dream to make GM great. But the speech was mostly censored by GM officials. John later leaked the speech, leading to his termination in 1973. This not only made him look like a hero, but showed GM's ignorance to the markets. John is now fresh out of GM and ready to take on the world as the greatest automotive innovator in the world. John DeLorean was going to rival GM and create a car with a stainless steel exterior that guaranteed buyers 25 years of life with no corrosion or rust, and with a top speed of about 140 miles per hour, controlled by a 5-speed gearbox. But John was broke at the time and needed financing. So from a few friends, namely Sammy Davis Jr., Johnny Carson, Ray Clark, and racing legend Jackie Stewart, who gave him $13 million for research and development for the first prototype. John still needed more money to set up the entire company, and so 7 nations came to bid for the opportunity, and the British government won the bid, offering John $156 million in grants and loans. The catch was for him to build the factory in Northern Ireland, a war zone known as Belfast. Belfast was going through a civil war between Protestants and Catholics. The advantage for Mr. DeLorean was the large pool of unemployment that meant cheap and easy to acquire labor. In 1976, Bill Collins, a friend of John DeLorean, built the first prototype, and at the New Orleans Dealership Association presentation, the DMC-12 was showcased to the world. It was a unicorn, a car like no other. No one had ever seen something like this. To make the car even better, John DeLorean teamed up with racing engineer from Lotus, Colin Chapman, cutting off his friend, Bill Collins. Bill found out that he had no creative power in building the DMC-12 and later confronted John, who gave him little to no closure, and this led to him handing in his resignation letter. So he teams up with Colin Chapman, and in 5 years, after being given the funds by the British government, the DMC project began. He had to make a few adjustments to make the car cheap and affordable. So he ditched the big block engine and got a 4-cylinder engine from Peugeot that had a top speed of 88 miles per hour. In October 1981, the first cars started rolling off the factory floor and on a boat headed for the United States. When the car got to the United States, they were not well received by car journalists. They stated that it was not what John DeLorean promised. It didn't handle great. It didn't work properly. the gaps were too big between the body panels, and it cost more than a Corvette. Sales went down and the car became a liability. Then Margaret Thatcher happened, and she regulated the finances coming into John DeLorean's company, a company that was nearing bankruptcy. John DeLorean was looking at dark times since his company was going under, and where the British government was going to seize the company, liquidate the assets if John didn't pay them back, and find a way to convince them that the company was still profitable. But in 1982, James Hoffman came calling. A DEA informant decides to set up John for a drug bust, for he knew he was desperate for money. Hoffman was a drug trafficker that got caught by the DEA. He set up a meeting with John DeLorean, but don't forget, this was 1982. President Reagan had declared the war on drugs, and this made it easier to bust John DeLorean.
Effort to fight the drug menace, to eradicate the cancers of organized crime and public corruption, to make our streets and houses safe again, and to return America to the days of respect for the law and the rights of the innocent.
The first meeting was not recorded between John and James Hoffman, so the DEA had nothing on John DeLorean. But Hoffman came back later and told the DEA that he was interested in the proposal. September 4th, 1982, another meeting between DeLorean and Hoffman at the Lamont Plaza was recorded. The meeting ended where John was supposed to come up with $1.8 million for the cocaine. The DEA still didn't have enough to take him down. The DEA knew John didn't have money, so a sting operation was set up in place to make sure John had the finances for the transaction. Hoffman told DeLorean of a crooked banker who would get him the finances for the drugs. Turns out the banker was an undercover FBI agent. The conversation was recorded.
DeLorean to a phony banker who says he can provide cash for the deal. He's on the left,
so
and
the
DeLorean
FBI and DEA introduces a new player, Morgan Hetrick, a fully fledged drug trafficker who was bringing in cocaine from Colombia. The government had an idea to bring John and Hetrick down together. Everyone wanted to be a hero. John DeLorean wanted to save his falling company, Hoffman wanted to be paid by the feds, and the DEA wanted this case to make Reagan look good in front of the press. So, at the Sheraton Hotel in 1982, as all parties toasted to seal the deal, John DeLorean was arrested by DEA agents. If John was to get sentenced, he was looking at serious time. During the trial, the press and the public were going nuts. Some said it was just another rich snob that needs to go behind bars. Others said that the methods used against John DeLorean were unethical and it's the government that's on trial. Finally, the jury found John DeLorean not guilty on all 8 counts. Turns out the case was an entrapment offense, which is the government setting up an innocent man or woman to commit a criminal act, which in this case was John DeLorean. John DeLorean is now a free man. 7 days later, his wife Christina leaves him and takes with her their 2 children and later serves him a divorce.
The sting operation fell through. You were acquitted. Your wife Christina stood by you throughout the entire trial, and then, not but several weeks later, left you.
Several days later.
His wife was tired of John's controversies that tarnished her image and career. She wasn't able to work or make a living anywhere in America. More controversies followed Mr. DeLorean, who was now under financial investigation, and turns out Colin Chapman, the Lotus racing engineer, and John DeLorean struck a deal in Geneva under a company known as GDP, which was nothing more than a shell company, a post office box in Geneva, post office box number 33. The deal was both of them would send $17 million of investors' money into GDP, funneling it into European bank accounts, then to his account in the United States, thus converting investors' money into his own. The question was, are these allegations true? John was a smart man, And to prove his innocence, he forged false documents. And only Colin Chapman knew the truth, but by now, he was already dead. Later that week, his wife testifies against him under oath. She said that she saw John making the documents with latex gloves and a sun lamp to cover up the forensic evidence. 1985. The DMC-12 appears in the cult classic film Back to the Future. John later writes the writers of the film, thanking them for keeping his dream alive. The last 20 years of John DeLorean were very quiet. He became a born-again Christian, he dated several women, and remarried later in life. And in 2000, he declared bankruptcy, losing his palatial estate, forcing him to move into a one-bedroom apartment, alone. John had lived a full life that reminded him of pain, money, joy, loss, achievements, and regret. Sadly, on March 31st, 2005, John DeLorean dies from complication from a stroke at Summit, New Jersey.
In passings of note, auto designer John DeLorean died Saturday in Summit, New Jersey of complications from a stroke. In 1981, he introduced his famous gull-winged car named for himself. Later, he was acquitted of plotting to sell cocaine to salvage his company. John DeLorean was 80 years old. Today,
a man who had it all was now reduced to dust. From dust he came, to dust he shall return. But his legacy lives on from his two kids, the DMC-12, the Pontiac GTO that Mr. John DeLorean built and fought for. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and leave me a comment down below. Farewell till next time, and keep trekking, fam.